What happens when the person who is supposed to protect you becomes the silent accomplice to your pain? My name is Elise, and for most of my life, I lived in the shadow of my mother's cruelty, with my father standing by, watching, doing nothing. I was a child desperate for love, caught in a storm of manipulation and neglect, and the one person who could have stopped it chose silence instead. Now, at 27, I'm finally free, or at least I'm trying to be. But freedom comes with a cost, and the past has a way of clawing its way back. I grew up in a house that looked perfect from the outside. Our suburban home had a white picket fence, a manicured lawn, and neighbors who envied our polished exterior. Inside, though, was a battlefield. My mother, Caroline, was a narcissist in every sense of the word. To her, I was not a daughter, but a mirror meant to reflect her brilliance. If I dared to shine on my own, her words became daggers. "You're nothing without me," she'd hiss, her voice dripping with venom, her eyes cold as glass. She controlled everything: me clothes, my friends, my thoughts. When I was 8, I won a school art contest, and she tore my painting to shreds because it stole her spotlight. I learned early to shrink, to make myself small, to avoid her wrath. My father, David, was the opposite: soft-spoken, kind in fleeting moments, but weak. He saw it all: the screaming, the belittling, the way she'd lock me in my room for hours if I disobeyed. He'd pat my head afterward, whispering, "It'll get better, kiddo," but he never stopped her. I'd beg him with my eyes, sometimes with words, to make her stop, but he'd turn away, retreating to his study or his beer. His silence was louder than her screams. It told me I wasn't worth fighting for. By the time I was a teenager, I'd built walls around my heart. I stopped crying when she called me worthless. I stopped hoping for Dad to intervene. I poured myself into school, into books, into dreams of escape. But the scars were there, invisible but deep. I doubted every choice, second-guessed every word, terrified of being too much or not enough. Mom's voice lived in my head, and Dad's inaction let it stay there. Then came the twist I didn't see coming. When I was 16, a new teacher, Ms. Larson, noticed me. She was young, barely 30, with a warmth that felt foreign. She saw the way I flinched when someone raised their voice, the way I apologized for existing. One day, after I stayed late to finish a project, she asked, "Elise, are you okay at home?" No one had ever asked me that. I broke down, spilling years of pain in a flood of tears. Ms. Larson didn't just listen, she acted. She connected me with a school counselor who helped me understand that my mother's behavior wasn't my fault. For the first time, someone saw Minute as an extension of Caroline, but as Elise, a person with worth. Ms. Larson became my lifeline. She encouraged me to write, to channel my pain into stories. Through her, I found a spark of courage. I started standing up to Mom, small acts of rebellion, at first wearing a shirt she hadn't chosen, speaking up in class. Each act felt like reclaiming a piece of myself. But it came at a price. Mom's rage grew, and Dad's silence deepened. "You're tearing this family apart," he'd say, as if I were the problem. I wanted to scream. "You let her tear me apart." But I didn't. I was still the good girl, the one who kept the peace. When I turned 18, I left. I got a scholarship to a college across the country and didn't look back. I cut contact with Mom, but Dad would call sometimes, leaving voicemails about the weather or his job, never mentioning her. I'd listen, heart aching, then delete them. I was building a life studying literature, working part-time, making friends who didn't know the broken girl I'd been. But the past wasn't done with me. Last year, I got a letter from Dad. Not a call, not a text, but a handwritten letter, shaky and smudged. He was sick, cancer advanced. He wanted to see me. Against my better judgment, I went back to that house, the one I'd sworn never to step foot in again. Mom was there, unchanged, her eyes still sharp with disdain. But Dad was a ghost of himself, frail and hollow. We sat in the backyard, the same one where I used to hide from Mom's outbursts, and he started to talk. "I failed you, Elise," he said, his voice breaking. "I saw what she did, and I didn't stop it. I thought if I kept the peace, it'd be better for you. I was wrong." Tears streamed down his face, and for the first time, I saw not the man who'd let me down, but a man drowning in regret. He told me he'd spent years justifying his inaction, convincing himself Mom would change, that I was strong enough to handle it. But now, facing his own mortality, he saw the truth. He'd abandoned me. I wanted to hate him. I wanted to scream, to unleash every ounce of pain he'd allowed to fester. But something stopped me. Maybe it was the way his hands trembled, or the way he looked at men as a child, but as a woman who'd survived despite him. I realized then that his regret wasn't my burden to carry. I'd spent years blaming myself for their failures, but I wasn't the one who'd failed. That night, I didn't forgive him, not fully. Forgiveness isn't a switch you flip. But I stayed. I sat with him, listening to his stories, his apologies, his hopes that I'd found happiness. Mom hovered, her presence a shadow, but I didn't shrink. I'd outgrown her. When I left, I promised to call, to visit. Not for him, but for me to prove I could face the past without letting it define me. Now, I'm back in my own world, teaching literature at a community college, writing stories that Ms. Larson would be proud of. I'm not whole, not yet, but I'm healing. Dad's still sick, and we talk sometimes, careful conversations that skirt the edges of what we've lost. Mom's still there, a distant storm I no longer fear. I've learned that family isn't a what it's earned, and I've earned my own. The question I started with lingers. What happens when the person who was supposed to protect you fails? For me, it meant building my own strength, finding my own heroes like Ms. Larson, who showed me I was worth saving. It meant facing my father's regret and choosing to move forward, not for him, but for the girl who survived. My story isn't over, and neither is yours. What will you do when the past comes calling?